When you look back at the choices you've made in life, what will stand out the most? The friends you've made, or the friends you've betrayed? The things you've witnessed, or the things you wish you hadn't? When it came time for Martin Scorsese and Rodrigo Prieto to tell the story of known mob hitman Frank Sheeran, they utilized old-school cinematography with groundbreaking visual effects, as well as a three-headed monster to capture the man who painted houses. This is the look of The Irishman. Essential to this film was the look, or rather the looks, that reflect the passage of time, the different eras of the protagonist's life and career. Obviously, the character's physical appearance, the costumes and set design help us to witness the more than a half-century span of the film. But Prieto discusses how in the 90 days of prep for the 108-day shoot, he and Scorsese wanted to create a look inspired by memory, by home movies and old family photographs.
One of the first things that Scorsese and I talked about was memory and how to portray that. And he mentioned the feeling of home movies, but he did not want a handheld, grainy style. So how do you show that? I came up with the idea that parallel to home movies is amateur photography. So I thought that maybe we could emulate the color of the old emulsions that people used to use in their home photography. So I researched Kodachrome and the Ektachrome, which were very popular at the time, and decided to give the 50s a Kodachrome look and the 60s an Ektachrome look. I mean, it's not that different. There is that feeling in my mind that of that memory of the saturated colors of Kodachrome and the sort of cyan blacks of Ektachrome.
Rodrigo Prieto created 4 lookup tables in collaboration with Matt Tomlinson at Harbor Pictures and Felipe Panzini at Codex to help suggest the feeling of morphing time. Kodachrome for the 1950s, Ektachrome for the 1960s, ENR Light for the first half of the 70s, and full ENR for the late 70s to modern day. ENR is a lab process similar to bleach bypass that reduces color saturation and adds contrast, which the lookup tables emulated. Since Kodachrome and Ektachrome are quite colorful, the effect on the storytelling is a reduction of color as the decades go by. I went with less and less color as we progress with Frank, because later in life, there's disillusionment, feelings of regret. This move from film to digital is also rather autobiographical of Scorsese's life. The changing capture format of movies, the changing culture of the film set, and now, with this being streamed on Netflix alongside the theatrical run, the changing way that we witness his art. In keeping with this philosophy, for lenses, Prieto did not want a modern feel, so he picked the Cooke Panchro Classics, supplemented by Zeiss High Speeds. He explains, "We chose spherical lenses and a 1:8:5 to 1 aspect ratio because the main character approaches his task of painting houses in a methodical, practical way. It seemed to us that old glass, but without heavy distortion or fancy flares, would be appropriate to represent Sheeran's perspective." Scorsese's encyclopedic knowledge of film is legendary, and when developing the look of this modern gangster movie, he returned to movies he had studied religiously for Goodfellas and Mean Streets, with Lucky Luciano and Public Enemy being some of his biggest influences. It's important to remember the movie's characters, Jimmy Hoffa, Frank Sheeran, and Russell Bufalino, were all real figures, and therefore we still have photographs, recordings, and even old footage of them. Hoffa especially.
Jim, if you don't smoke and you don't drink, and you don't play around at golf, what do you do for entertainment?
Right here, work.
This is entertainment?
7 days a week, I have more fun here working than anybody can have on a golf course or any sport you can name. Every minute here.
Fortunately, there's so much on Jimmy Hoffa. 16-millimeter documentaries, videotape, speeches, you have everything. You have everything. Still photographs, fantastic. We actually recreate some of the stills. The one where he's in jail, he's sitting against the wall, and the policeman comes in and takes him. That's a still from him, from Life magazine, I think, of Jimmy in jail.
With a movie that deals with many shifts in time and place, and also starring arguably the most prolific male actors of the past 40 years.
You talking to me?
Scorsese and Prieto would have to employ de-aging technology to show the actors in their youth. This has been widely reported, but the process itself hasn't received the acclaim or coverage that perhaps it should. Every scene that didn't require visual effects was shot on film, with the ARRICAM LT and ST cameras on Kodak 5219 and 5207 film stock. And then this mega build is how Scorsese and Prieto shot their visual effects. This complicated 3-camera rig is known affectionately as the three-headed monster. It consists of a red helium as the main camera in the center and 2 Arri Alexa minis as witness cameras on either side. These witness cameras were only shooting in infrared to capture the infrared tracking markers that were painted on the lead actors' faces to be used to de-age them in post. This way, De Niro, Pacino, and Pesci could play their characters over a span of 50 years without a mass of prosthetics, wearing helmets or other facial gear, or even subbing in younger actors. Visual effects supervisor Pablo Hellman and his team at Industrial Light and Magic ran the captured footage through a full CG makeover to create younger versions of the actors. Scorsese wanted to shoot most, if not all, of the dialogue scenes with as many as 3 cameras simultaneously, meaning Prieto had at times 9 cameras with 9 focus pullers on some scenes. That's pretty intense.
The thing about the three-headed monster, the central camera is a red helium, and we had 2 Alexa minis on the sides. The minis were witness cameras to capture the information of depth of the shots, and this was for the CGI face replacement. So one of the big challenges was, as you see, it is a monster. All of the cameras in one head. So we had to figure out how to make it lightweight enough and not too crazy big to be able to manage the camera and to be able to have it in a remote head and and things like that. So I tested and tested and tested, to make it feasible to be able to do the shots.
At its heart, this movie was a character study of Frank Sheeran, a union organizer, a hitman, and a friend and bodyguard for Al Pacino's Jimmy Hoffa. The design of the camera work is centered on the tall and imposing Frank Sheeran's ways. He is a very methodical person, and he approaches a murder as just part of the job. He was desensitized to killing in World War II, where he saw many, many days of combat and even executed prisoners of war. While it may seem straightforward, it actually explains the plotting nature of the film. The shots and camera movement are also methodical like the protagonist. Here, we are seeing cinematography as a storytelling element, matching the storyline and the character's development.
We also felt that the movie couldn't be as exciting and extreme in the look of it as maybe Casino or other movies or Wolf of Wall Street. It had to have this somber thing to it too, because Frank Sheeran is like that. He approaches his work as he's a killer, but it's a job for him. So it's not, this exciting thing where, we see the gun and we see the victim and then we see, his eyes and the muzzle. It's very simple. It's sudden and ugly.
Let's look at the beginning of the film. The Irishman opens with a tracking shot set to vintage music, which is fairly routine for Scorsese and a stylistic element he adopts often. However, we can clearly sense the footsteps of the camera operator. It's reminiscent of the smooth flowing Copacabana take in Goodfellas, except this one's kinda clunky and ends with a close-up of a geriatric and wheelchair-bound Robert De Niro. It's as if Scorsese is showing us that this is the end of the road for the gangsters he's depicted in the past. This is not gonna be another Scorsese mob movie. Scorsese liked the shot so much that he refused to stabilize it. Perhaps this was to give it the feeling of someone walking in to meet with the protagonist, whose confession forms the narrative of the movie. Something that is heightened when Robert De Niro's Frank Sheeran talks directly into the camera. This was perhaps inspired by how the book is written. Frank Sheeran confesses the whole thing to the author of the book, Charles Brandt. One of Scorsese's best-known trademarks is his renowned use of slow motion in order to enhance subjectivity. One such example is the slow motion used during the Quaalude-fueled beer pong match in The Wolf of Wall Street, which allows the audience to experience the sluggish, euphoric high of the characters. In The Irishman, the best example is the ultra-slow motion wedding of Bill Buffalino immediately after a brutal murder. This uncomfortably slow scene exacerbates the juxtaposition between the murderous betrayal of a close friend and the happiest day of someone's life. Slowly and painfully, we move from the bride and groom's kiss to the congregation, and the result is brutally raw cinema.
And we shot those, I believe it was about 350 frames, part of it. Some shots were 500 frames. We kind of decided, depending on the action, how slow to go. But the range would be, between 350, 500. Maybe we did something at 700 frames per second. Yeah.
As a fan of cinema and of Scorsese's, The Irishman is awe-inspiring in its look, its story, and its performances, both on and off screen. But it's also kind of bittersweet. This may be the final gangster epic from the man who defined the genre. It may also be the last time we see De Niro in a role of the great gangster. The last time he and Joe Pesci grace the screen together, and the last time that he and Al Pacino face off. And just when we start to feel that way, Scorsese leaves the door open. Thanks for tuning in to the Hurlbut Academy look of The Irishman. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and let us know in the comments what film we should do the next look of. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and ring the bell so you never miss another cinematography breakdown.